So Canva and Flodesk just released a new direct integration, and I spent yesterday testing it so that you don't have to. And if you don't know me, hey, I'm Molly. I'm an OVM and a systems strategist, and I help creative entrepreneurs pick the tools and setups that actually fit how their brain really works, which means I spend a lot of time separating tool updates that matter and ones that you really shouldn't care about. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the setup, flag what Flodesk's own documentation might leave out, and give you my honest verdict on whether it's worth it to actually use this integration. But if you want a starting point for cleaning up your own backend and operations, there's a free quiz in the description where you can do just that. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to pull up Canva. So go ahead and log in and make sure you're logged in Flodesk as well to whatever account that you want to use for this integration. Okay, so first things first, we are going to start in Canva, but you want to make sure that you're logged into Flodesk for whatever account you want to use for the integration. This is especially useful if you're like me and you're logged into other clients' Flodesk sometimes, because yesterday when I was testing it, what ended up happening was I created a connection with like one of my clients' Flodesk accounts instead of mine. So I had to log out and then reestablish the connection to my Flodesk. So just make sure that you're logged in first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click Create Design, and we're going to go down to emails. And you can either start in a blank one or from a template. There's a lot of really good templates in here. I would recommend starting with one that you want to kind of base your design off of, or that's the closest that you can find to the design that you ultimately want to make. That way you don't get overwhelmed from like all the possibilities and starting from scratch with that kind of blank slate. All right, so let me pick which one I'm going to do. Let's do this one. And then I'm going to click, so I clicked on it and then I'm going to click customize this template. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to establish that connection first, because when you get the authorization out of the way first, you're not troubleshooting like account issues after you've already spent a bunch of time designing. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to click on share, and then we're going to click down here for see all, and then we're going to click on Flodesk. I'm already logged in, so I'm going to go ahead and log out. So we'll click connect and then connect again. You'll get a screen that pops up that prompts you to sign into Flodesk. And so you'll log into Flodesk like normal. Like I mentioned yesterday when I was testing this, it automatically logged me in. So I'm not sure if that was just a bug or if that's kind of what to expect for certain circumstances, which is why I recommend logging into the right Flodesk account first. So Canva is requesting permission to access your Flodesk account. I'll click allow, and then you'll see I'm logged in. And from here, you're just going to design it like you design anything in Canva with a few caveats. So some templates are going to come over as images. Everything is like one big block in Flodesk, but when you're editing it, you'll see if I hover here, it'll say double click to edit. So those are going to be images within the flow of the email as well. So for accessibility reasons, that's important to call out because we want to make sure to add alt text to this part of the email. So if you want to add alt text, I come down, if you see where the delete is, I'll click on the three dots for more, and then I'll click alternative text. And here I'll say whatever it is. And say this was just like emojis or maybe like a wave pattern to make it look like the top is colored in that wavy pattern. I would mark it as decorative. And then that way, if somebody's using a screen reader, it's not automatically going to read this section because it's just for decoration. And then if you want to edit anything in here, you're just going to double click it and that'll bring up like a Canva within a Canva. It's Canvaception, and you can edit anything just like a normal Canva. And then when it comes to seeing what's possible with the new email templates within Canva, I would really recommend just spending a few minutes looking through all of the different options and templates when it comes to that. And then no matter what option or template you choose, there are a couple things that you need to do before you export to Canva. So the first thing is going to be whatever it's titled is actually going to pull to your subject line in Flodesk. And so we just want to make it standard. And so I would do something like maybe May newsletter 1, and then I would put my subject line. And that way it'll come over as the name of the email within Canva. And then when you go to send it, it brings you through to like prompt you to update the subject line. So you can update it there rather than updating both. Okay, so a couple more things that we need to update here is number one, we need to remove this address. And the reason why we want to do that is because if I don't remove this address here, Flodesk goes, okay, we need to include the physical address, right, to stay compliant. And so they'll just add it to the bottom instead of inserting it where it looks like it's part of the email design. So just make sure you do that. That's kind of like not really called out enough in Flodesk's and Canva's documentation for this. So just make sure you do that. And then you also want to double check any links. So if I go over this and I click on edit link, you'll see that I have 3 email links that I can add here. So I can do unsubscribe, update preferences, or view in browser. And so that way you don't really have to worry about knowing what those links are. And they do work. I did test them. But other things that you'll want to make sure here that Flodesk would automatically do, stuff like your logo. So here, it's not even a real logo, which is kind of silly. It's like a text and then an image here. And so you'd want to make sure that that either goes to your site or something else, because, for example, when you're using a Flodesk template, those logos are automatically going to whatever URL that you set it to in your settings. Now we're actually going to export it to Flodesk. So I click on share, and then I'm going to click on see all. And then under messaging, I'm going to click on Flodesk again, just like when we connected it. And now I can either pick one of these emails to add it to, and I can also preview it here too. Or I can create a new email. So I'll create a new email and then I'll share to Flodesk, and then I'll click check it out. All right, and then you'll see that this comes in as one big block, right? But say I wanted to update something in here. I would click on edit in Canva, and that's going to redirect me to whatever Canva I have that is connected. So let's go back, and I want to point out a couple things. Okay, the first thing that I want to point out is that, as you can see here, the address comes in after the block. And that's because Flodesk can't insert anything into the block. So in this case, I might not really care how this looks, but if I cared that, like, no, I want the address and then the logo on the bottom, I might come in here and be like, okay, let me add the logo here. I would make the background color using the eyedropper. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this, make it the same color. And then let's say I'll edit this in Canva, and all the way on the bottom, I am going to delete this so that it looks better. Okay, and then I'm going to go back, and it's going to prompt me to refresh. And then you'll see here that it did update. And one thing I also want to call out, and this might improve, but the font color is different than what was in Canva. And it might be pulling automatically from somewhere, but just something to look out for as you're starting to use it. And I'm sure these features will be improved. So I'll just grab this font here, or you could go back into Canva and do that. And maybe I'll add a spacer, but I would put it as the background color. And then you would go through and choose your audience, who it's coming from, your subject line, all of that, which is the normal sequence of events when you're in Flodesk. So I want to talk about the 3 things that you can't do with this integration. So the first thing is that there's no merge tags. And so merge tags are like where you can insert somebody's first name or their email address or something like that. So you can't do that within the block of text in the Canva email. And it makes sense as to why you likely can't do that, because of privacy concerns and all of the legislation around how we're supposed to be using email addresses on our list. So it is a limitation, but it's honestly kind of reasonable. You also can't do any link or click actions. And so that means if I wanted to add somebody to a segment, if they click a button, I can't do that if I want the button to be in the Canva email. There is a workaround that you can do to this where you could design the first half of the email, put it into Flodesk, put the button under the section, and then design the second half of the email to be able to achieve being able to take those link or click actions, but you can't do any actions when it comes to inline text or begin any type of automation. And then the last thing is, right now, you can't do any workflow emails with this. Hopefully, the integration of being able to use these emails within the automated workflows in Flodesk is coming soon, because I think that that would be really helpful. I think that this style of email translates really well to something like a welcome sequence or even delivery emails when it comes to maybe like a lead magnet or freebies. And then so where I land on this as a OBM and a system strategist is that you're likely not in Flodesk every day. And so what that means and how that translates to your workflow is that you're not going to have to either relearn if a button moves or get yourself back in that mindset of like, oh yes, this is how things work in Flodesk. You're likely in Canva a lot more than you are in Flodesk. And that actually works to your advantage in this case, especially if you don't really care about some of the limitations that I've already mentioned. So if you're an avid Canva user, which if you've made it this far in the video, you likely are, it's going to take you a lot less time to design something in Canva than it would in Flodesk. And that's just because it's a tool that you're using more. And so it becomes almost like muscle memory. You already know kind of second nature how to add a text box, what you can do. Maybe you already have your brand font saved on there, or you have elements that you already use. And you can also copy and paste between Canva files. So maybe instead of having to download the image, re-upload it into Flodesk and be like, oh, the resolution looks weird, you can design the whole thing in Canva now. And so it's worth switching your workflow in how you're already using Flodesk and Canva if you do a lot of your work already in Canva when it comes to your business or designs. And if you're already making graphics in Canva, then downloading it and then re-uploading it to Flodesk or using that older integration that they had where you can just choose your design, it's also worth it to switch then because you can make it more cohesive in one click, especially if those limitations that I mentioned don't really apply to how you're already using email. However, if you are using those limitations that I mentioned, don't change how you're operating just so that you can use this. It really doesn't make sense if you need those link actions or you need to be able to reference people's names within your email. Don't change that just because this is now an option. It's likely going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And then deciding whether an update is worth switching your workflow for is part of a much bigger question when it comes to your business. And that question is which tools are actually pulling their weight and which ones are just either taking up space in your mind, your operations, or your budget. So if you want a starting point on figuring that out for your own business, I've got a free quiz in the description and it'll tell you where in your operations you need to pay attention to first and give you a really quick win that you can implement. The quiz only takes about 5 minutes and you'll walk away knowing what to clean up and in what order. And if you found this useful, I'll be doing a lot more of these new tool updates in the future. So subscribe here or follow me on Threads. I'm at virtually Molli on there too. So you don't always have to be up to date and on top of what the newest features are and how they relate to you, your business, and your workflow. I'll see you soon.